No. If your husband came to you while you were at your lowest, grieving, barely sleeping, still in your hospital gown, and slid a stack of papers across the table and said, "Just sign these, it's just formalities," what would you do? Would you trust him? Would you sign? I did. And those 3 words, just a formality, cost me everything I had built over 7 years. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I co-founded a healthcare technology company from a spare bedroom with nothing but a laptop, a maxed-out credit card, and an idea that I believed in more than anything. By the time my son was born, that company was valued at $11 million. My name was on the founding documents. My fingerprints were on every single contract, every pitch deck, every sleepless night that built it. And then, I signed those papers. And 12 days later, I no longer existed in that company at all. But what my husband didn't know, what he never thought to check, was that I had been keeping records since the day I first felt something was wrong. Emails, voicemails, screenshots, a folder on a hard drive that I kept in a fireproof lockbox under the floorboards of my mother's house. He thought he had erased me. He thought wrong. My husband and I met in graduate school. His name was Daniel. Daniel was the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately started calculating who in it was useful to him. I didn't see that then. I saw charm. I saw ambition. I saw someone who believed in me when I talked about my idea at 2 in the morning over terrible coffee in the library. The idea was simple in concept and brutally hard in execution. A software platform that helped small independent medical practices manage insurance billing without outsourcing it to massive third-party firms that charged them 40% of their revenue. I had watched my mother's primary care practice nearly collapse under that weight when I was in high school. I had watched her cry at the kitchen table over invoices. I never forgot it. Daniel said he loved the idea. He said he wanted to build it with me. He had a background in finance, and I needed someone who could handle the business side while I handled the product. It felt like a partnership. It felt like the beginning of something real. We got married 2 years later. We launched the company, MedBridge Solutions, the year after that. For the first 4 years, things were hard but good. We bootstrapped everything. I wrote the product roadmap. I managed our small engineering team. I flew to medical conferences and gave pitches in hotel ballrooms to skeptical office managers who had been burned by bad software before. Daniel handled the financial modeling, the investor decks, the contracts. I trusted him with that completely. That was my first mistake. The problems started quietly, the way they always do. It was small things at first. Daniel started having investor calls that he didn't loop me into. He started referring to the company in interviews as his company, not ours. I noticed, and when I brought it up, he laughed and said I was being sensitive. He said I was exhausted, which was true. Our son Eli had just been born 6 weeks premature. He spent 19 days in the NICU. I spent those 19 days in a chair next to his isolette, and I barely slept, and I ate vending machine sandwiches, and I called into product meetings from the hospital hallway with my voice low so I wouldn't disturb the other families. When Eli finally came home, I was not okay. I had postpartum anxiety that I didn't recognize as a clinical condition at the time. I thought I was just tired. I thought I was just a new mother. I didn't know that what I was experiencing, the constant dread, the inability to eat, the intrusive thoughts, was something that needed treatment. Daniel knew, or at least he knew something was wrong with me, and instead of helping me, he used it. 3 weeks after Eli came home from the hospital, Daniel came to me with a stack of documents. He sat down at the kitchen table while I was nursing our son, and he placed them in front of me, and said the company's legal structure needed to be reorganized for the Series B funding round. He said our attorney had flagged some technical issues with the equity split that could complicate the round. He said it was just a formality. He said I needed to sign. He had a pen ready. I was holding a 6-pound baby who had just spent 3 weeks fighting to breathe. I had not slept more than 2 consecutive hours in a month. My hands were shaking from anxiety I didn't understand yet. I asked him if I should read them first. He said, and I remember this exactly because I have replayed it thousands of times, "Claire, I need this by end of day." It's just restructuring paperwork. Do you really want to hold up $11 million in funding because you want to read 40 pages of legal boilerplate right now? I signed. I signed every page he put in front of me. I found out what I had signed 8 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, when an email arrived from our company's bank addressed only to Daniel regarding the authorized signatory update on all company accounts. I wasn't copied. I wasn't mentioned. I went into the company's internal system to check our incorporation documents. My name was not there. I pulled up the cap table. The equity structure I remembered, the one where I held 49%, was gone. In its place was a document dated 3 weeks after Eli came home from the hospital, signed with my signature, that showed I had transferred my entire equity stake to a holding company that I did not recognize. For $1 in consideration, I had signed away my half of an $11 million company for $1. I sat at my desk for a very long time. Eli was asleep in the next room. The house was completely quiet, and I felt something I cannot fully describe. Not anger yet, because the anger came later. What I felt first was a cold, spreading clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize the story you have been telling yourself about your own life is not true. I did not call Daniel. I did not say a word to him when he came home that evening. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I watched him sit across from me and talk about a meeting with the venture firm, and I smiled. And I said that sounded exciting. And inside, I was already making a plan. The first person I called was my mother. Not because she could help legally, but because I needed to say out loud what I had found before I could figure out what to do about it. She didn't say much. She listened. And then she said, "Don't touch anything. Don't move anything. And don't let him know you know." My mother is a doctor. She has navigated insurance companies and hospital administrations and government regulators for 30 years. She understands that information is leverage, and at the moment you show your hand, you lose it. I took her advice. The second call I made was to a business litigation attorney. Not a divorce attorney. That came later. A business litigation attorney who specialized in equity fraud. Her name was Patricia, and she had a reputation for being the person you called when someone had stolen your company. I met her at her office on a Thursday morning while Daniel thought I was at a pediatric checkup for Eli. I brought everything I had, the original incorporation documents, the original operating agreement with my signature, 3 years of emails where I was clearly making product decisions, my name on every patent filing, every pitch deck I had ever built, and a photograph of the documents Daniel had given me to sign, which I had photographed the night I signed them, because something about the thickness of the stack had made me uneasy even then. Patricia reviewed everything for 2 hours, then she looked at me and said, "These documents were executed while you were clinically sleep-deprived, postpartum and under financial duress, and the consideration paid was $1 for roughly $5.5 million in equity. This is fraud." I asked her what we could do. She told me. And then she told me one more thing. "Don't hire me yet, go home. And for the next 90 days, document everything." So I did. For 3 months, I was the perfect wife. I smiled at dinner. I attended the company holiday party and laughed at Daniel's jokes and shook hands with investors I had originally brought to the table. People who had taken my calls before they ever took his, and I said nothing. I watched Daniel give a speech at that party about his vision for MedBridge, and I stood in the back of the room and I felt the specific humiliation of being erased in real time, and I swallowed it, and I pulled out my phone and I recorded the speech. Because he said things in that speech that contradicted the formality story. He talked about the restructuring as a strategic decision he had made. He talked about streamlining ownership ahead of the Series B. He said in a room full of 40 people, including 3 investors, "I made some hard decisions this year to position this company for the next phase." I have that recording. I also found the holding company he had transferred my equity into. It was registered in Delaware 4 months before Eli was born. He had been planning this before our son arrived. He had set up the structure while I was still pregnant, while I was still flying to conferences and building the product, while I was still fully present and pouring myself into something we were supposed to be building together. That discovery was the one that broke something open in me. Up until that point, I had been able to hold on to some small corner of doubt. Maybe it really had been a mistake. Maybe there was an explanation. The Delaware registration date closed that door permanently. I brought everything to Patricia. She filed for divorce and initiated a civil fraud claim simultaneously. Daniel was served on a Wednesday morning at the office, in front of his assistant and 2 members of the engineering team I had hired. He called me 17 times that day. I answered once. He said, "You're going to destroy everything we built." I said, "You already did that. I'm just making sure you don't profit from it." The next 7 months were the hardest of my life in a different way than the NICU had been. The NICU was terror and love and helplessness. The litigation was grinding and expensive and designed, I think, to make you quit. Daniel's attorneys filed motion after motion. They argued that I had signed voluntarily. They hired a psychiatrist to argue that I had not been clinically impaired at the time of signing, that postpartum anxiety was not a recognized cognitive impairment under contract law. Patricia was better than all of them. She had 3 things they didn't anticipate. First, she had my OBGYN's records from that period documenting my anxiety symptoms and a flagged note from a follow-up appointment where my doctor had written, in her own words, "Patient presenting with significant cognitive disruption and sleep deficit consistent with postpartum anxiety disorder." Second, she had the Delaware incorporation date, proof of premeditation. And third, she had the holiday party recording. That recording was the one that mattered most in the deposition. Daniel's attorney had spent an hour and a half arguing that the restructuring had been a mutual decision, that I had been fully informed, that I had participated in the planning. And then Patricia played the recording. The room went silent. Daniel's attorney asked for a recess. They came back with a settlement offer. It was not enough. Patricia told me to reject it. We went back to mediation. They offered more. Patricia told me the number I deserved and told me to wait. 2 weeks before the scheduled trial date, Daniel settled. "The terms are under a confidentiality agreement, so I can't give you the specific number. What I can tell you is that I walked away with my equity restored, a cash settlement, and sole decision-making authority over the product division of MedBridge, the division I had built, which was subsequently sold 18 months later as part of the Series B close. My mother came to my apartment the night the settlement was finalized. We sat on my kitchen floor and ate takeout, and she cried a little and I didn't, because I had already cried everything out during those 7 months. And what I felt that night was not joy exactly. It was more like the specific quiet of a storm that has finally passed. I want to tell you what I learned, because I think it matters. I learned that the most dangerous betrayals come wrapped in familiarity. Daniel didn't steal from a stranger. He stole from someone who had stopped reading the fine print because she trusted him. He used my exhaustion, my vulnerability, my love for our son, and my belief that we were partners. He used all of it as tools. I learned that silence is not the same as weakness. Every instinct I had in those first weeks was to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation, to make him admit what he had done. And I think if I had done that, I would have lost. Because he would have had time to move assets, to destroy records, to build a story, the 90 days of documentation, the patience, the performance of normalcy, the quiet, methodical gathering of evidence. That is what won. I learned that the people who try to make you feel like you are being dramatic, like you are overreacting, like the paperwork is just a formality, and you're holding everything up by asking questions, those are exactly the people you should be asking the hardest questions of. And I learned this. Your name on something matters. It's not ego. It's not vanity. When you build something, your name on it is the only record that you were there. The moment you allow someone to remove it, you become invisible. And invisible people have no standing. Fight for your name. There is one more thing I want to say. Because I've thought about it a lot and I think it's the truest part of all of this. Eli is 3 now. He has my eyes and Daniel's nose and an opinion about everything, which is, I think, going to serve him well. He calls me Mama, and he calls Daniel Daddy, and he doesn't know any of the story yet, and he won't for a very long time. but someday, he will ask. And when he does, I'm not going to tell him that his father is a monster. Because I don't think that's the right thing, and I don't think it's even accurate. I think his father is someone who looked at a moment of advantage and took it without thinking far enough ahead to understand what it would cost him. In a court of law, and in something harder to quantify. What I will tell Eli is this. Build things. Put your name on what you build. Read everything before you sign it, even if someone you love is sitting across the table with a pen and impatience in their eyes. Especially then. And if someone ever takes something from you that was yours, be patient. Be quiet. Be methodical. And keep the receipts.